Hello friends, in this video tutorial I'm going to explain to you how I created this detailed floor dimension plane. Now a floor dimension plane is basically a general floor dimension plane that shows you each and every important dimension that is there in a building. So we start from a long dimension, then we do grid dimensions, or we can do wall dimensions. We indicate the thickness of the walls, we do the measurements of the rooms, the window openings, sometimes the distance between the window openings depending on you, and some internal dimensions such as this door opening, the width of this laundry area, along with this ensuite. Now since this is a simple one, I've just mirrored this one this side, so this dimension can also be used this side. So let's begin. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is to create a copy of the initial floor plan that you had drawn. And paste it over the dimension floor plan area, which is like over here. Don't make any changes to this thing yet. Firstly, what you need to do is go and set up your scale. So we'll click on A03, that's where our floor dimension plane is, and as you can see it's quite small. So what we'll do, we'll increase the scale so that it looks, we'll increase the scale so that it becomes bigger and it looks neater. So I believe I'll have to use a scale of 1:60, or if I'm finding it too small still, I can use a scale of 1:50. Now if this is, the bigger this is, the better it will be for drafting. However, this is too huge, and what I will do is simply put it back to 1:60. I'll position my drawings properly, I'll lock my viewport, and then I'll click out of it. Now it is very important that when you draw an outline, you have to bring it in here, and then you have to scale it so that you know what your annotative scale is going to be. So as you can see that as soon as I change this to a scale of 1:60, all the annotations went missing. They are not actually missing, they are there, but they will show up at the initial scale that they were, and that is the scale of 1:80. So now I'd group this floor plane, and then you can ungroup this. And then what we'll do is, firstly we'll take out everything that is unnecessary in this floor plan. So we'll delete all the section markers. We'll also take out all the floor tiles, or you can leave them there, you can just make them transparent, but in this case let's say we'll just leave it there. We won't actually be removing any of the tiles. Regenerate will bring back any lines that have been covered by your tile hatches area. So what we'll do is, I'll bring back the initial full screen by pressing on Ctrl+0, or I'll use this to clean screen, and then I'll also bring back the command line, that's Ctrl+9, and there you have your command line. Now what I'll do is just take this hatch and just make them really light, because they are not really currently important. So we just change the transparency to a number of 40 or 50. So now that you can see it's become light, just regenerate and it will put back all the texts. Now what I'm going to do is start to adjust all of my what would you call this, the grids. So the first, before setting up the grids, what I'll do is I'll switch to the scale that we had set up in sheet A03 for this, that was 1:60. Then what I'll do is I'll increase this, I'll change the scale for these grids, and then put them to the scale that we had set up, which was 1:60, and delete the scale of 1:80. Then what I'll do is select everything in here, and then I'll start working on everything one by one. So I'll selected everything, then I'll click on this drop down arrow, then I click on my M text and I change its scale to 1:60. Now if some of the texts are actually at 1:60, you will be finding it a bit difficult to change the annotation. So what you can do is simply click on select Simla, then uncheck all the other ones by clicking on shift and then going like so. And then we'll change this scale again. We'll add that scale first, then we'll delete the rest. As you can see, it has changed all of the texts to 1:60. Now a quick trick to know that your texts are consistent is you select your entire flow plane, click on this drop down arrow, then click on your M text. Now if the annotative says varies, if the annotative scale says varies, then what you have to do, oops, my apologies, click on the M text. If this annotative scale says varies, then you have to check which one is not at the standard scale that you had set up over here and change it to that. And this should be yes. And if this says it's 1:60, that means you don't have to worry. All your M texts in here are at a scale of 1:60. So I like this placement already. So what I'll do is I'll just type the rectangle command and simply draw one rectangle. Then I'll offset it at this distance. So that I get a clean and consistent grid line. Now after drawing this rectangle, you might want to go back to your dimension sheet and then check if you are not actually crossing out. So for this case, this is okay. Then what you want to do is line up all your grids to that, and it should be exactly perpendicular, like so, right? Then from there you will select all these grids. Now if you select anything by mistake, what you can do is hold down Control and then uncheck that line, or you can hold on Shift and uncheck whatever you have checked by mistake. So we'll simply pull all these lines down. Now I've already shown you how to create all these in another video, so I won't actually be going over the basics now. Remember, it's supposed to be perpendicular and not snapping to a center. So simply just bring that down here, and that's your perpendicular. Whenever you're using AutoCAD, always use the hardest method possible so that if there's any other kind of problems, you will be able to diagnose and rectify immediately. So let's begin. As you can see that the tile hedge keeps on covering the text, so a neat trick to move that one away is to select all your hedges and just do a draw order, DR for draw order, and then just send them back, like so. So we will now turn on our dimensions layer. Then we will create one dimension, a general dimension, and this has to be slightly clear from the bottom of the grid line. If you try to match this one up too much, you're just trying to confuse a lot of people, so don't do that. And if you think that your dimension is should not be disturbing the grid line, you can simply move it out like so. Similarly with this side, do not worry about this corner, worry about this text and this distance. So now that that is done, what we will do is we will start with the smaller dimensions. Now you don't have to keep on clicking on dimension. You can just type DIMC for dimension continue and it will pick up from the last point that you had let it go. Currently I am dimensioning the initial floor plane. This is the overall floor plane. This is the overall dimension. I'm giving the initial floor plane's dimensions now. And I like to start working from one side and then go to the other side. So remember, click on one dimension and then click on the rest. I mean, dimension continue, then do the rest. Make sure that these spaces are consistent in between. As you can see, currently they are not. So we can just slightly move them up so that they look neat and consistent to each other. And make sure not to shift any of the dimensions out of its place. If they get shifted, move them back again. Now for this dimensioning, you can also turn on the ortho mode. So it will keep your dimensions tracking straight. Now we'll just dimension continue using DIMCONT. Currently what I'm doing is dimensioning all the window openings and the spacing between the windows. This spacing from this to this. As you can see that a dimension continue makes your dimensioning quite easy. Now what I'll do is I'll go for the room sizes. So you have to cascade your dimensions downward properly. So I'll just move this one down. And then I'll do the big ones first and then all the small ones will follow neatly. So at this point I'm using 150 mm thick wall. Now I'll go ahead and click on do all of my dimensions. And dimension continue to pick up from the last point. Now we'll just dimension all the rooms on one side. And you have successfully done one side of your dimensioning properly. Now we'll do the other side. Similarly, we'll be cascading all the dimensions, but in this case, there aren't much to cascade. Ensure that you are snapping in the right place. And using the dimension continue also keeps your line consistent. Keeps your dimensioning consistent. You don't have to keep on snapping to one place. You can just click on the other side and it will continue by itself. Like so. Now we'll dimension the room. We have actually dimensioned the room, my apologies. We'll now dimension the window openings. There's also something known as a multiple dimension, but I would not recommend it because it will confuse a lot of people with their dimensioning works. If you do not know what you're doing, it will give you all kinds of dimension automatically, and then you'll have to select and delete the ones that are not necessary. So you have done that like so. Now the dimensions have to be done on all four sides. So this might get a bit tedious, but I'll still do it for the sake of this video. And that is all that you had to dimension on that side. There isn't much to dimension over there. Now we'll dimension this side, but since these two are of the same size as these two, we'll leave them as they are, so you can follow this dimension. Or if you wish, you can just mirror your dimension, or you can place your dimension there by yourself. Now we'll dimension this door opening over here. You don't actually have to dimension the door opening, because your D02 will be reflected on the initial door and window schedule. Now let me just find where I've placed that window schedule. Here. So D2 will have an opening of 850 mils, so you'll know how much the distance is. So you don't really have to dimension, but if you wish, you can do that, no problem. As you can see that you have done a floor dimension plane. It looks very less, but it's quite a lot of dimensions here. And the dimensions for the toilet and bathroom is actually shown in a separate exploded view of the plane in here. So you have its typical floor plan, then you get your windows and other things over here. I've also added some images for the things that I wish to have installed in there. Now we can add one more line of dimension here, and we'll dimension our window. I had forgotten about that, my apologies. And in that dimension, you can also get your porch's dimension. So now you know that the width is 1.5 for this rear porch, and the length of it will be 2515 millimeters. And then you add another 900 mm from the door. Or you can just add your, let's just give a simple dimension over here. The more the merrier. Now I made a mistake here. This should be actually sitting over here, and this should be sitting over there, like so. And we'll create another dimension. Try to keep your dimensions away from the window and door, the other pull-out keys. And I'll add one more missing dimension over there. Now if you're seeing that your view direction is incorrect, you can just select all your dimensions and simply click on properties, then click on the view direction. In this case it's left to right. You just click on it and switch it to right to left. Now as you can see that it looks neat and tidy. Now that you have dimensioned everything here, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and plot the dimension plane over here, and I'll just simply center it so that it looks perfect and lock the viewport. Double click outside and simply adjust this so that it's in line with the grids. So just draw an X line and place it over there, and move this one and delete this. There you go. So that was all for this video. In the next video tutorial, I will actually show you how to create a reflected ceiling plane. Now, reflected ceiling plane is basically what you're looking at from the bottom to the ceiling level. So I've created one over here, and it says that number 3 will be 10 mm file line Gboard install as per manufacturer's instruction on 50 mm by 50 mm noggings at 600 mm centers both ways. So that was all for this video, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you and goodbye.